Imagine the quietude of a forest grove in ancient India, centuries before the Common Era. The air is thick with the scent of damp earth and sandalwood incense. The only sounds, the distant call of a peafowl and the gentle rustle of leaves in a warm breeze. A seeker, perhaps one of the many wandering ascetics who populated the Gangetic Plain during this period of profound spiritual upheaval, sits beneath the sprawling canopy of a Bodhi tree. His eyes are closed, his breath is slow and measured, and his fingers methodically gliding over a string of simple seeds. Each bead that passes between his thumb and forefinger is a silent anchor, a physical marker for a recited mantra or a completed breath, a step deeper into the vast internal landscape of contemplation. This seemingly humble practice, a tool for taming the restless mind and cultivating unwavering mindfulness, would become a foundational element of Eastern spiritual discipline, known as a mala. Yet, its incredible journey and its profound, often unacknowledged, impact on faiths far beyond its origin are a story shrouded in the mists of time. To understand the genesis of this powerful spiritual technology, we must transport ourselves to the India of the 5th century BCE. This was an era of immense intellectual and religious ferment. The old Vedic Brahmanical order, with its complex fire rituals and rigid social hierarchies, was being challenged by a new wave of thinkers and mystics known as the Vadas. These were the wanderers, the strivers, who renounced worldly life to pursue ultimate liberation, or nirvana, through personal effort, meditation, and philosophical inquiry. It was from this fertile ground of spiritual experimentation that both Jainism and Buddhism would spring. The core challenge for these practitioners was internal: how to discipline the mind, which the Buddha himself would later describe as a flickering, unsteady, and difficult to guard. They needed a method, a practical tool to help focus their energies during long hours of meditation. The practice of japa, the repetitive chanting of sacred sounds or divine names, was already an ancient concept, with roots in the even older Vedic traditions. But the innovation was the creation of a physical device to track these repetitions, freeing the mind from the task of counting and allowing it to fully immerse in the meditative state. The earliest were likely crafted from natural, readily available materials. Seeds from the Rudraksha tree were particularly sacred in the Shaivite traditions that coexisted and influenced early Buddhism. These textured, multifaceted seeds were believed to be the tears of the god Shiva, imbued with spiritual potency. Similarly, beads carved from the wood of the Bodhi tree, the very species of fig under which Siddhartha Gautama attained enlightenment, carried immense symbolic weight for his followers. The number of beads on these strings was not arbitrary. The most common number, 108, is a figure of profound cosmological and spiritual significance in Dharmic religions. It is said to represent the 108 earthly desires that must be overcome, the 108 names of a chosen deity, or the 108 lines of energy believed to converge to form the heart chakra. Some traditions connect it to astronomy. The distance between the Earth and the Sun is roughly 108 times the Sun's diameter. This numerical symbolism imbued the mala with a sacred architecture, transforming it from a simple counting device into a microcosm of the universe itself, a tangible link between the human practitioner and the cosmic order. The larger, distinct bead, often called the Guru bead or Shapyuk, marks the starting and ending point, a reminder of the teacher-student relationship and the ultimate goal of the practice. The act of using the mala was therefore a deeply symbolic journey, a circuit of 108 steps that with each repetition brought the seeker closer to the central truth, the sattva within. It was a technology of the soul, elegant in its simplicity, profound in its application. This unassuming string of beads, born from a practical need and a quest for enlightenment, was now encoded with layers of meaning. But its journey was just beginning. How did this quintessentially Eastern tool, so deeply embedded in the philosophies of India, embark on a silent pilgrimage across deserts and mountains to be adopted and adapted by the devotional practices of entirely different world religions?
Building on the profound simplicity of these early Buddhist beads, we trace their enigmatic migration westward. Picture the bustling, chaotic, and vibrant artery of the ancient world, the Silk Road. It is not just a single road, but a sprawling network of trade routes, a 4,000-mile-long conduit for much more than spices, silks, and precious metals. It is a river of ideas. Along its dusty paths, merchants and monks, soldiers and scholars traveled between the great civilizations of Asia, Persia, and the Mediterranean. They unknowingly carried with them the invisible cargo of philosophies, artistic styles, and spiritual technologies. Buddhist missionaries from India journeyed east to China, but also west, establishing communities in Persia and Mesopotamia. In this dynamic melting pot, a Buddhist monk from Bactria might share tea with a Nestorian Christian merchant from Syria, their conversations planting seeds of understanding and, perhaps, of ritual exchange. It is in this context of slow, organic cultural osmosis that the concept of the prayer bead begins its journey into the Western consciousness. As we shift our focus to the 3rd and 4th centuries CE, we find a parallel spiritual movement taking root in the deserts of Egypt, Syria, and Palestine. These were the desert fathers and mothers, the early Christian ascetics who, much like the Indian, renounced the world to pursue a life of radical devotion and prayer in the solitude of the wilderness. Figures like Saint Anthony the Great sought constant, unceasing prayer, a practice known as pacutia. A central part of their discipline was the daily recitation of the 150 Psalms of David. This presented a practical problem, especially for the many ascetics who were illiterate. How could they keep track of their prayers? Early accounts, such as those in the Gina Dosabic Evangel, describe them using simple, rustic methods. Some would gather 150 pebbles, moving one from a pile to another with each completed prayer. Others, more ingeniously, tied knots into a length of rope. This device, which would evolve into the Orthodox Christian or prayer rope, served the exact same function as the Indian. It was a tactile aid to free the mind for devotion. The question that historians and theologians have wrestled with for centuries is this: was the emergence of the Christian prayer rope a case of spontaneous, parallel invention born from a similar human need, or was it a subtle, perhaps even unconscious adoption of a highly effective spiritual technology encountered through the Silk Road? The evidence is tantalizingly circumstantial yet compelling. Archaeological finds from the period show a remarkable degree of cultural fusion. The Greco-Buddhist art of Gandhara, a region in modern-day Pakistan and Afghanistan, depicts the Buddha in the style of a Greek god, a stunning testament to the synthesis of Eastern and Western aesthetics. We know that Christian communities, particularly Nestorian Christians, were active along these same trade routes. It is not a great leap to imagine that a Christian monk, observing a Buddhist counterpart using a string of beads for mantra recitation, would recognize its utility for his own practice of reciting the Psalms or the Jesus Prayer. The form, a stringed circlet, is a far more specific and less obvious solution than simply using a pile of stones. The lines between inspiration and independent creation begin to blur, revealing a shared human need for tangible, rhythmic aids in the difficult work of connecting with the divine. As the historian of religion Thomas Tweed notes, religions are not hermetically sealed containers. They are porous, constantly borrowing and adapting rituals and ideas. This was not a secret conspiracy, but a natural process of cultural diffusion, a testament to the universal appeal of a tool that could ground the spirit and focus the heart. The prayer bead was simply too good an idea to remain confined to one tradition.
Extending that intriguing cross-cultural exchange, we now arrive at the Christian Rosary, a symbol instantly recognizable worldwide, held in the hands of popes, peasants, and presidents. From the earliest Christian prayer ropes to the formalized rosarium of the medieval period, the beads provided a structured meditative path for devotional repetition. The traditional Catholic narrative, solidified in the 15th and 16th centuries, attributes the creation of the Rosary to a vision. It is said that in the year 1214, the Virgin Mary appeared to Saint Dominic de Guzman, a Spanish priest and founder of the Dominican order, and gave him the Rosary as a powerful spiritual weapon against heresy. This sacred origin story has been a cornerstone of Marian devotion for centuries, providing the practice with a divine charter and profound spiritual legitimacy. For millions of believers, the Rosary is not merely a counting tool, it is a gift from heaven, a way to walk with Mary through the key mysteries, the joyful, luminous, sorrowful, and glorious of Jesus' life, death, and resurrection. However, when we apply the lens of historical and comparative religious studies, a more complex and layered history emerges. This isn't to invalidate the spiritual truth of the tradition,
but to understand its human and historical development. Historians note that the practice of using beads to count prayers, specifically the Our Father, was already well established in Europe centuries before St. Dominic. These paternoster beads were used by laypeople, often as a substitute for the 150 psalms recited by monks in the divine office. What happened in the later medieval period was a formalization and popularization of the practice, with the Hail Mary prayer becoming central and the meditations on the mysteries being attached to the decades of beads. It was an evolution, not an ex nihilo invention. It is here that the research of early 20th century Orientalists and scholars like Sir E.A. Wallace Budge and L.A. Waddell becomes so illuminating. They were among the first Western academics to systematically point out the striking structural and functional parallels between the Catholic Rosary, the Islamic Bulla, and the Buddhist and Hindu. The similarities are too numerous to be dismissed as mere coincidence. Both the Rosary and the Bulla are typically circular, representing eternity and the cyclical nature of life. Both use a larger, distinct marker, the crucifix or medallion on a rosary, the bead on a Bulla, to signify the beginning and end of a devotional round. Most importantly, their core function is identical, to facilitate a state of meditative prayer through the rhythmic repetition of sacred words, using a tactile anchor to occupy the body and free the mind. This isn't about diminishing one tradition's originality, but rather about revealing a deeper, universal human impulse. It is an example of what theologians call inculturation, where a powerful spiritual practice is adopted and imbued with new, context-specific meaning. The physical form of the prayer bead may have journeyed from India, but its soul was rebaptized in a Christian context, its purpose reoriented from mantras of enlightenment to prayers of salvation and contemplation of Christ's life. So, what does it mean for our understanding of faith when we discover such profound yet often unacknowledged ritual kinship between seemingly disparate spiritual paths? It challenges us to look beyond the hard boundaries of sectarian identity and recognize a shared human grammar of devotion. The human desire for a tangible connection to the sacred, for a method to still the turbulent mind and open the heart, is a current that runs through all religions. The journey of the prayer bead from a Bodhi tree in India, along the Silk Road, into the deserts of Egypt, and finally to the cathedrals of Europe, is a silent testament to our interconnected spiritual heritage. It proves that in the universal quest for transcendence, we have, in more ways than we know, always been speaking a similar language.